Welcome to this lecture on motor units as part of the course on neuroscience of human movement. So, in today's class we will be talking about motor units, innovation number and types of motor units, and we will reserve these two topics, size principle and rate coding, probably for a future class. So, we will be focusing on these and the details related to these in today's class. So, to remind ourselves what is the problem under consideration, what is the goal in this course. We are observing human movements. So, what is observed is usually a movement trajectory. I am making that movement, so you are observing this trajectory. What? So, the only observable output of the central nervous system are actions, are movements. So, you are practically observing a displacement time profile. This is what you are observing, but how is this displacement time profile generated? Note that this displacement time profile is caused due to relative movement of bones. We saw in the earlier class that bones move relative to each other, causing displacements, what is observed as displacements by us. But this relative movement of bones is caused due to contraction of the muscles. So, contraction is generated in the muscles responsible for those movements. So, but we also said that it is possible that if I want to have a smooth ending to a movement, I need to also produce contraction or activity in the antagonist muscle, in the muscle that is producing the opposite action, so that I can have a smooth ending. So, what is produced, what is causing this time profile of displacements is basically a time profile of contractions or muscle forces. So, what is not observed is the time profile of forces produced by the muscle. This is not observable by us, at least not without special instrumentation. So, not readily observable. Secondly, how are these muscles controlled? Commands from motor neurons are passed on to the muscles. So, there must be, if contraction is happening in some time profile, so there must be a command time profile also, give or take some time profile, neural command time profile is generated from the motor neurons. But note that these motor neurons are located in the spinal cord, they must also be controlled somehow, probably even at an even deeper level they are probably controlled by some higher mechanisms or maybe some reflex mechanisms, something else. So, some commands to the motor neurons are also sent, that time profiles we do not know. So, these commands we do not know. Lastly, what we do not know anything about is the intention. If I am making this movement, if I am making that movement, you do not know why I am making that movement, what is the intention behind that. So, especially in voluntary movements. So, there are two classes of movements, we are going to call that those as reflex movements and voluntary movements. In voluntary movements it is not clear what the intention is, by just observing the movement you cannot say what the intention was at least. So, there are lots of things that we do not know. So we will be going deeper and deeper as the course proceeds, but where we are right now is approximately here and here. So, now we will be talking about what happens here in this stage and in this stage, how are these things working together to produce a movement. So, that is the goal for us. So, just to remind ourselves. So, this is the PEEP into movement generation system. So, long ago, about 100 years ago in 1925, Sir Charles Sherrington said that several motor neurons control muscle fibers in a particular fashion. What he said was that motor neurons control several muscle fibers attached to them, innervated by them. So, and he called all the muscle fibers attached to a particular motor neuron as a motor unit. So, it was revolutionary thought in the 1920s. So, he said that one motor neuron and all the muscle fibers innervated by it together is called as a motor unit. And because it turns out that whenever this motor neuron achieves action potential, whenever this motor neuron reaches threshold and produces an action potential, it also causes contraction in all the muscle fibers attached to it. So, that means if this motor neuron is activated, if this motor neuron is firing, that means all the muscle fibers will ultimately eventually produce force. Okay. So, there are several things. So, the motor neurons themselves are located in the ventral root of the spinal cord. So, they are located in the ventral root ganglia on the spinal cord, and they need not. So, for a given muscle, so let us take this muscle for example. For a given muscle, all the neuronal innervations need not come from the same motor neuron, it can come from multiple motor neurons. In other words, different nuclei can control different parts or different muscle fibers within the same muscle. So, that means what you see here, that there are some green lines coming here and then there are some different colored lines coming here. They are coming from different nuclei, distinct nuclei in the ventral side of the spinal cord. So, these neurons are called motor neurons. Why are they called motor neurons? We saw in previous classes why. Because they are responsible for production of movements, they are the ones that release acetylcholine. When there is an action potential, they release acetylcholine into this neuromuscular junction here. The neuromuscular junctions are all here. Acetylcholine is released, and when acetylcholine is released in this region, it causes an action potential in the muscle fibers. Why? Because we said the process, we have repeated this multiple times, due to the response of the nicotinic cholinergic receptors and sodium entering inside, action potential is caused, and then there is excitation contraction coupling, and eventually force is produced. Now, because they are responsible for movement generation, these neurons are called as motor neurons. Okay. And so, different number of motor neurons attached to muscles. So, this may be, there may be more connections are not shown, and also note from the same nuclei they may attach to different muscles. So, here is one muscle, here is I am going to call this as say muscle 1, I am going to call this as say muscle 2, we are going to call the green one here as neuron 1 and the blue one here as neuron 2. Note, there is not any one-to-one relationship between M1, M2 and N1, N2, they both can attach to different muscles simultaneously. That does not mean that they will produce force in the same different muscles simultaneously, that is not necessary. So, there is no exact one-on-one relationship. What is also true is that they exit from the spinal cord as a nerve in one bundle, and then as they get closer to the muscle, what you see here is that there is branching, you see branching happening here, and sufficient number of branches happen here, and they innervate multiple number of muscle fibers. And it turns out there is also not necessarily any topographical arrangement of motor unit versus muscle fibers. In other words, usually in the usual case, muscle fibers innervated by different motor units are found to be neighbors to each other. So, if one muscle fiber is contracting, there is no necessity its neighbors are also contracting. That is not necessary, because it is possible that its neighbors are innervated by a different motor unit and that motor neuron is not firing. A muscle fiber is going to contract if and only if its boss or the motor neuron associated with it produces an action potential. At other times it is not going to contract, or it is not going to produce an action potential. So, the neighboring muscle fibers may belong to different motor units, that is one. Two is that the number of muscle fibers attached to a motor unit varies, it need not be the same, right. So, it can be very high, it can be very small, and depending on that the properties will change. So, we will continue to see that. So, what you see here is another example of the situation. So, there is neuron 1 that is here and that is innervating. You see different regions in the muscle bundle, and there is neuron 2 that is attaching, that is mixing in with. So, this is neuron 2 here. So, that is mixing in with what is already innervated by neuron 1, and there is neuron 3 which is again mixing in. So, if neuron 1 alone were to fire, what would happen is that only those fibers will contract, its neighbors need not necessarily contract unless its neighbor is also innervated by the same motor unit, or it is also possible that both neuron 1 and neuron 2 are firing. In that case, its neighbors may also contract, and so on and so forth. So, let us to remind ourselves, a motor unit is composed of a motor neuron and all the muscle fibers innervated by it. One motor neuron can innervate multiple muscle fibers. However, if you take a muscle fiber, it is going to be innervated only by one motor unit, one motor neuron. So, that means that a one to many relationship between motor neuron and muscle fibers. A given muscle fiber receives information or command from only one motor neuron. So, whenever that motor neuron is giving the command, the response by the muscle fiber is obligatory. It does not have the response, it does not have the power to say no, I am not going to contract, sorry, I am receiving conflicting commands. No, there is only a single commander for a muscle fiber. From the muscle fiber point of view, for each muscle fiber there is only one motor neuron that is commanding it, but one motor neuron can command multiple muscle fibers simultaneously, and whenever it fires, all the muscle fibers attached to it also fire. This is comparable to the situation in the class today. Now, you are all here, I am teaching to all of you, I can be considered to be the motor neuron. You are all taking in some sense say a lesson from me or a command from me. So, that means that I am the teacher, there are like 10 of you here, approximately 10 of you here. All of you receive command only from me, but I can teach to 10 of you. So, that is the relationship. Of course, the relationship is obligatory in the muscle sense. So, whenever I give an assignment, you must do it if it is a graded assignment. You do not have the choice of not doing it. That response is obligatory, or the neuromuscular junction or the neuromuscular synapse is an obligatory synapse. Every time the motor neuron fires, the muscle fiber must fire. If it does not fire, then it is a disease. We saw and listed the diseases of the neuromuscular junction in the previous classes. So, what else? We said that different number of muscle fibers may be innervated by a motor neuron. This number can vary between as small as 5 to as high as 2000. So, what does this mean? If you assume that all muscle fibers produce approximately the same force, this is a wrong assumption. In reality, this is not true. Different muscle fibers produce different amounts of force, but for the purpose of this discussion alone, let us assume that any given muscle fiber under consideration for the purpose of this class alone produces the same force. Then if I have a motor neuron that innervates 5 muscle fibers, say x amount of force is produced by each muscle fiber, then I have a particular case where the innervation number can be as small as 5. That means 5 muscle fibers are innervated by a single motor neuron, and when that motor neuron is firing, how much force is going to be produced? 5x, is it not? Because I said x amount of x Newton or x millinewton force is going to be produced by a muscle fiber. Of course, I am assuming all muscle fibers produce equal force. For the purpose of discussion, this is not true. And it is also possible that this number may vary, it can be 10, or in the big muscles of the leg it can be as high as 1900 or approximately 2000. In that case, so what will be the force that will be produced? That will be 1934x. So, it is possible to vary the amount of force produced by choosing the right motor unit, the right motor neuron. If you choose a motor neuron that is connected only to 5 muscle fibers, the total force that is going to be produced will be approximately 5x. Actually, this is not exactly equal to 5x. this will be approximately 5x. Why? Because all the muscle fibers attached to motor neuron reach action potential at approximately the same times, and they undergo excitation contraction coupling at approximately the same time. So, that means for their forces to sum, we said that the sarcomere force production, when we discuss the sarcomere force production, we said that forces are summed in series within myofibril and in parallel across myofibrils. This is what we said. So, within a fiber, for, and if force has to be added across multiple fibers, then there has to be phase agreement, or in some sense they all have to produce force at approximately the same times. If the forces are are not in sync, or they are out of phase, then it is possible that the forces may not sum. The time at which it reaches is only approximately the same. So, the force summation is also only approximately true. So, this 5x and 1934x is approximately true. So, in general, why have this arrangement? That is a question. Why? Because it is necessary for me from time to time to produce forces with precise control. There are times when we as humans need to manipulate objects with precise control. This is the case of say for example, manipulating an object, a finger or handheld object. Say I am writing with the pen, I am writing with this pen and I am marking things here, I am circling things here, things like that involve precise control of forces with my fingers. So, that means I am more interested in the fineness of control. So, in such cases I am going to use motor neurons that innervate a smaller number of fibers, or there are cases when I need to produce a relatively large amount of force. For example, when I am standing, even during quiet standing. So, when I am standing, my body weight is supported by the muscles responsible for posture maintenance. So, although it might appear like standing is a passive activity, it is not. There must be some forces that must be produced to ensure that I do not fall down. So, posture is maintained by active processes, or when I am walking, or when I am jogging, or when I am say running or sprinting. In such cases, the amount of force that needs to be produced increases tremendously. Sometimes the amount of force that needs to be produced can be several thousands of newtons. So, there are cases when I need to produce few newtons or less than a newton amount of force to manipulate objects with the fingertips, and there are cases when I need to produce several thousands of newtons or kilonewtons of forces from time to time. These are distributed, of course, these are in different limbs. So, I am talking about hands and legs, but there are different cases. So, when I need to produce a large amount of force, I could choose this motor unit that produces that amount of force. In general, the higher the innervation number, so which is approximately 2000, the higher is the force, but that also comes at a cost. The control is less precise. I cannot control this very precisely. If I am saying I need very precise control, the amount of force produced is going to be small. So, there is a compromise, there is a trade off. Is it possible for me to have both? The answer is yes. It turns out that there are these are only two extremes. There are also cases with medium or intermediate innervation numbers. Note, I am talking about I am taking innervation numbers from different muscles here. This is medial gastrocnemius, this is biceps brachioradialis, this is rectus lateralis. So, these are different muscles, these are not the same muscle. However, even within the same muscle, you are going to have a distribution of innervation numbers. You are having innervation numbers ranging from relatively small to a relatively large number. So, about 20 to 50 motor neurons innervate a muscle. So, and their ranges can be as small as the amount of force produced by a given motor unit can be as small as 5% of the total force that is produced, can be as high as 75%, or can be as the volume of muscle fibers occupied by the fibers innervated by one motor neuron can be as high as sometimes as high as 75%. So, this means that there is a variability between muscles, this is the between muscle case. There is also a variability of the innervation number within the muscle. So, if I take one muscle, this innervation number starts from a small number, can be very large. Let us take an example. So, innervation number may change. Let us take the example of, say, I like this example, it is related to our research what we do. The first dorsal interosseous muscle, so or what we call as FDA, this muscle is responsible for producing that action, right. So, for that movement, this muscle is responsible. What are the innervation ratios associated with this? This can be between, innervation number can be between approximately 20 to approximately 1700. So, again if I assume that x millinewton of force or x units of force is produced by a muscle fiber, and all muscle fibers have equal amount of force producing capability. In that case, the motor unit associated with 21 innervation number is going to produce approximately 21x, and this is going to produce approximately 1700x. There is great variability in the amount of force. So, the greatest force that is produced, that can be produced by a motor unit in the first dorsal interosseous muscle, can be as high as the average force produced by a leg muscle. Let me say that one more time so that it is not confusing. The greatest force, the maximum force that can be produced by the finger muscle, by the first dorsal interosseous finger muscle, can be as high as the average force, not the greatest force, the average force produced by some leg muscles. So, that means, so it could give you an idea of the strength that of these muscles and of its force producing capabilities. And note what else also happens. What else happens? Innervation number changes with age, and it changes as a function of populations. What do I mean by populations? Health and disease, as a function of disease, as a function of health, as a function of exercise, as a function of the type of exercise, etc. So, what happens with age, for example? What happens with age is some motor neurons simply die with age. As a person gets older, some motor neurons die, and what happens to the muscle fibers innervated by them? All the muscle fibers innervated by that motor neuron are orphaned for a brief amount of time. So, for a brief amount of time, these motor neurons are orphaned, they do not have a boss. After some time, the motor neurons, the neighboring motor neurons develop new branches and innervate these orphaned muscle fibers. So, these muscle fibers that were earlier part of a different motor unit are now part of a new motor unit. Now, let us consider the situation with a bit more rigor and to see what happens. So, earlier they were part of motor unit 1. Okay, let us say that the number of, for the sake of discussion, let us say that the number of muscle fibers in motor unit 1 was approximately 50. Okay. Motor unit 2 initially had say 100 muscle fibers. Okay. Now, this motor neuron is dead, its motor neuron is dead, it is like so it is not functional. So, these 50 have become orphans, they get attached or they are innervated by this motor neuron or MN2. So, what will then be the innervation number for the motor unit 2? Motor unit 2 will have a new innervation number of 150. How does this change things? How does this change things? Anybody can guess how this changes things. Earlier I was able to produce, if each of the muscle fiber is producing x millinewton of force, then earlier I was able to produce forces as small as 100x, now I am going to be able to produce 150x. This might be viewed as good, that is good. So, as you get older I am going to produce a greater amount of force. No, what happens is that as you get older, your ability to produce fine forces reduces. I am no longer able to produce fine forces, which is the reason you observe older people when they are grasping objects or when they are walking, their body is stiffer they usually produce larger amount of force than the physics requires them to produce. So, the physics requires them to produce a certain amount of force. As you get older, the amount of force produced is much greater than what the physics demands. That means that it is energetically inefficient. I am producing more force than needed, my body is stiffer than needed. So, and it also changes across populations. We will discuss this in future slides or in future classes. And also what else happens is, I said earlier that there are in the usual case that different muscle fibers or neighboring muscle fibers need not belong to the same motor unit. But in some special cases, it turns out that a given muscle has specialized compartments, what are called as compartments. These compartments are innervated by different groups of motor neurons that are selectively innervated depending on, that are selectively activated depending on the task at hand. If this is the task I want to perform, a specific compartment is activated. If a task to be performed is different, then a different compartment is activated. Now, this raises the question, what is a muscle? Is a muscle a morphological unit in some sense? Is it a geometrical or a construct that is purely morphological, or is it functional? This debate continues in the area of musculoskeletal biomechanics. Let us not get into that, but there are also cases, let us just note that there are also cases where muscles function in compartments. The best example is once again the muscles associated with the hand function. So, these are called the extrinsic muscles of the hand that have long tendons going and attaching to different fingers. They are all present, they are housed in the forearm, but the force produced is on the fingers. They have relatively long tendons that go through this. These muscles are, it has been shown that these muscles have compartments. So, and they are activated depending on which finger needs to be activated, which is the reason in humans especially we are having relatively more independent finger movements when compared with other animals usually, and this also changes as. So, there are different properties of motor units. These properties are the speed of contraction, the maximum force that can be produced by a motor unit, and the fatigability of this. There are some correlations between these properties, we will see them one by one. We said in the previous class what is a twitch force. So, one stimulus is arriving, force is produced, and if another stimulus is arriving before this stimulus could relax, the force adds up and keeps on adding up like that. If the stimulus train is fast enough such as that, it produces relatively smooth and constant, what is appreciably constant when compared with the previous cases. We call that as the smooth tetanus or tetanic contraction. Now, a question is what frequencies should I activate to produce a given force, or what are the speeds at which I should activate, what are the frequencies that are associated with it, what are the maximum force that I can produce. These are the questions. It turns out that different types of motor units and muscle fibers are present. So, in the case of there are two extreme cases, we will consider two extreme cases. Let us consider the case of the fast twitch. In this case, it turns out that the force produced is something, say about 100 millinewton. Say for example, that is produced in about say 30 to 40, say about 40 milliseconds. In the slow case, a similar a slightly different force profile is produced. This is 40 milliseconds. However, the amount of force produced is of the order of few millinewtons. So, that means the fast twitch fibers can produce relatively large amounts of forces in relatively brief periods, but the slow twitch fibers produce small amounts of forces. Okay. So, also note the scales here. So, this is about 125 millinewtons produced by these fibers, and this is about 500 millinewtons that are produced by these fibers. And so, as the frequency of firing increases, one would see as the frequency of firing increases from 46 to 56 to 60 to 100. So, as the frequency of firing increases, what you see is that the force increases. So, as the frequency increases, the force increases. There is a relatively good agreement in that. This is 46, this is 56, this is 60, and that is like 100. So, that is true also in the fast twitch fibers. So, this is in the case of slow twitch. This is also true in the fast twitch fibers, except that the force produced is much greater. It is about 500 millinewton, here it is about 100. So, the scales are different, please note that. Also the time scale is different, here this is 400 milliseconds and this is 200 milliseconds. So, that amount of force in the fast twitch fiber is produced in a smaller amount of time. This smaller amount of force is produced in a greater amount of time. So, that means these are two extreme cases we have taken, and we have obviously we have conveniently taken the two extreme cases that are required. There are cases in between. Let us consider where these would be useful. Are there times when I would like to produce relatively small amounts of forces for relatively long periods of time? The answer is yes. This is the case of endurance sports, for example. I need to produce small or relatively sustained amounts of force or sustained amount of activation to finish running several tens of kilometers in the case of a marathon, for example. So, it is not expected, and it would not be fair to expect for us the muscle structure and the control and the training method between an endurance athlete, between a marathon runner and say a sprinter, between Usain Bolt, who is a sprinter, he runs 100 meters in less than 10 seconds. So, if he is running 100 meters in less than 10 seconds, what are the odds that this person is actually going to be able to complete a marathon? The truth is that this person will find it very difficult to complete a marathon, despite the fact that he is actually a Olympic level sprinter. He is suited for this sort of explosive force production. He has more of these motor units, those motor units that produce large amounts of force in relatively brief periods of time. The training, the composition, and what is the best composition? Actually, the best thing is a mix of two, is it not? So, in real life there are going to be situations where you are demanded to produce relatively small amounts of forces for relatively long periods of time, relatively large amounts of forces for relatively small periods of time, and everything in between. There are going to be cases when you are going to need an intermediate amount of force to be produced for an intermediate amount of time. So, a healthy mix of all these things is required. The point here is that there are these two extreme cases that in which these motor units can come in, and this varies as a function of stimulation frequencies, this varies as a function of motor unit properties. And what else? The peak force that is produced is a function of stimulation frequency, we said that. So, in the case of fast motor unit, if you take, what happens is that as you increase the frequency, the amount of force that is produced increases in a very high to a very high level, can be as high as 400 to 500 millinewtons. So, but that does not happen in a slow motor unit. So, in a slow motor unit, after some time this curve saturates, and that happens at about 100 to 125 millinewtons. Even as I keep increasing the frequency of firing, even as I keep increasing the stimulation frequency, the output is not going to greatly increase in the slow case, but is going to greatly increase in the fast case. Here the colors are mixed up. Here we are calling the blue color as slow and the red color as fast, but note the difference. This is peak force, absolute peak force. Here the y axis is normalized by the maximum peak force. what does this tell us is this is the percentage of maximum of peak force that can be produced by a given motor unit. So, if I keep stimulating, what happens is the motor unit that is responsible for that is slow and the motor unit that is fast reach at different rates, and they will peak out at a particular frequency. They will reach out at a particular frequency. Note the differences. What is the difference? These two are probably produced, these two curves, this curve and this curve are produced probably from the same data, yet you are going to have a difference in what is slow and what is fast, which curve is appearing on top and which curve is appearing in the bottom. The reason is we are normalizing it by the maximum force that is produced. And we said there are different types of this, we classified only 2, but actually there are more than 2. Those cases that are those units that are slow, that are oxidative, these are extremely fatigue resistant. They produce very small amounts of force and they consume less amount of energy. The chance of them getting fatigue is very small, and they recover very fast from fatigue. These are the motor units that are recruited, these are the fibers that are recruited during walking, say for example. And then if let us say that I am interested in brisk walking, faster walking, there is a difference, there is a gradation. You are taking a stroll, like there is a nice beautiful campus here, so you are just taking a walk, just seeing the natural, enjoying the natural beauty without focusing on the velocity of your walk, or in other words you are taking a stroll. Not shown here is you are taking a stroll, relatively slow walking, then walking, or I am interested in brisk walking. Brisk walking is this case where I am not running, or what is the difference between walking and running? There is a particular point at which in running there are going to be times when both your feet are going to be off the air. During walking there is going to be at least one foot, not clear which foot is, at least one foot is going to be on the ground, is it not? Simple differentiation. So, I am doing fast walking but not running. In that case I will be recruiting more of this type, which is going to produce relatively fast, they are relatively fast, they are still fatigue resistant, and then I am jogging. In this case I am actually engaging in running but relatively slow running, is it not? In that case there is going to be a mix of oxidative processes and glycolytic processes. So, there is going to be a mix of aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. There is going to be fast units that are recruited, and these fibers are of intermediate fatigability. The amount of force produced varies, right, keeps increasing in that direction. The amount of energy expended keeps increasing in that direction. The chance of fatigue keeps increasing in that direction. The chance of recovery keeps decreasing in that direction. As I am proceeding from slow to fast, the chance of recovery from fatigue reduces, the chance that I am going to get fatigued increases, goes up, and the chance that I am spending more energy and producing more force increases. And I can keep doing this. I can sprint. If a person is sprinting or engaging in or weightlifting or so doing something like that, in such cases the process is purely anaerobic. It does not involve aerobic process, it does not involve oxidative processes, it only recruits fast fibers and is highly fatigable. I cannot lift a 100 kg mass and keep it and sustain it for a very long time, nobody can do that. First of all I cannot lift a 100 kg weight, but let us say that I am able to lift it. It is not like I am going to be able to do that for a very long time. We saw in previous class that I am also not going to be able to lift it very quickly. I can lift a relatively light object very fast, that is a relationship between velocity and force requirement. Here in this case I cannot keep lifting it and have it for a very long time, because this is I am going to be recruiting highly fatigable units, and so I am going to get fatigued very soon. So, that means although there is a need for me to produce more force, more energy is expended, they are going to fatigue fast and the chance that they are going to recover is relatively slow. So, we will stop here. What we need to see in future classes: size principle, rate coding and the implications of size principle and rate coding for control of movement and so on and so forth. We also will have to discuss other things concerning motor unit functions such as electromyography and how to process electromyography signals. Okay, so, what we have seen in today's class is motor neurons, types of motor neurons, and motor units, the types of motor units, and the importance of innervation ratio, how that affects function, and how different ranges or different classes of type 1, type 2, etc., classes of units or fibers can lead to different function. So, with this we come to the end of this class. Thank you very much.